Welcome, traveler. Tonight, we drift into a story carved not in laser fire or the hulls of starships, but in conversations. Subtle nods, careful pauses, and words deployed like precision instruments. This is the tale of how humanity, yes, you, dismantled. A galactic empire not with a fleet, but with a smile and a well-timed shrug that you're already aboard. The floor beneath your boots hums with the soft pulse of interstellar inertia, and through the elongated viewing pane to your left, the stars don't twinkle. They burn with ancient, deliberate contempt. You're a guest in the Empire's diplomatic station, an orbital relic carved from the core of a dead moon. It smells faintly like ozone and arrogance. Good news. You're just here for the story, not the radiation. That if you end up liking this quiet little corner of the galaxy, feel free to subscribe and leave a like, but only if it genuinely makes your evening better. Tell me where and when you're listening from. I always love seeing the spread across the stars and time zones. Now, lower the lights, maybe let a soft fan hum in the background, and let's begin the drift into tonight's quiet orbit. Your boots click on obsidian tile. The air inside the negotiation hall is thick with chemical sterility and something older, ritual. Perhaps they make it cold in here on purpose. Intimidation by HVAC settings. The hall stretches longer than it needs to, a favorite tactic of the Thalakdari, whose concept of diplomacy includes delaying eye contact until everyone's knees hurt. At the end of the corridor waits the Tri-Species Council, diplomats from the Axid hierarchs, the Solari Chorus, and the Empire's own chosen, the veiled dominion that you're not wearing armor. Just a charcoal diplomatic suit with light reflective thread, a hidden patch of bioskin that adapts your scent to match the average of your company's preferred pheromone signatures. It was a gift from the Terran Office of Galactic Relations. Or a dare. Hard to say with them. They call you Envoy, with a capital E. There are no other humans here. In fact, the Empire insisted, one envoy, no support team, and no off-world contact for the duration of negotiations. That wasn't a red flag. It was a full semaphore orchestra waving knives. Still, you accepted. Because this is what humanity does now. After centuries of being seen as the reckless newcomers, the Terrans stopped trying to dominate with speed or strength. Instead, they offered something far more destabilizing. Compassion that didn't flinch, logic with a sense of humor, and an unsettling knack for reading the room. You step up to the triangular negotiation platform. No one speaks. This is a test. The Empire values silence as a currency. The longer you wait, the more power you project. So you sit. Then, you do the most scandalous thing of the session. You smile. They hate that. The Veil Prime, a tall figure with a neck like coiled filament, watches you with compound eyes that don't blink. He hisses something subvocal to his translator pod. A second later, a synthetic voice blooms into the air between you. Human. You breach the atmosphere of solemnity. Apologies, you reply, even-toned. That was my face's error. It sometimes acts on its own. The Axid Ambassador, a cloud of tightly woven neural filaments housed in a containment orb, shivers in its glow. You wonder if it's amusement. You log the moment. Maybe you're not the only one here with thoughts out of line. That a tray rises from the center dais, bearing 6 orbs of shimmering blue fluid. A drink. The Empire's way of beginning formal talk. You reach forward, but not before waiting precisely. For 0.2 seconds, just enough to suggest both knowledge and hesitation. You raise the orb. To beginnings? Another hiss. This time from the Solari rep, a being made of layered sonic membranes. It hums a chord that barely passes as a scent. The Empire has learned to tolerate Terran idioms, but they've never liked them. You drink. The fluid tastes like regret and electricity. First contact was a decade ago. Not with this empire, but with one of its tributary states. The Korean Accord had led to trade, some limited tech exchange, and eventually, invitations. The Terran ambassador, who accepted, had made one small error, referring to the galactic throne as a bureaucratic antique. He was promptly rotated out of phase. Now, the Terrans play a slower game. Less cowboy diplomacy. More long-form, small talk as weapon stuff. That's why you're here. Today's topic. Border flexibility near the Gauss expanse. A meaningless stretch of space with 6 resource-poor moons and a decent view of a nebula shaped like a confused giraffe. You suspect it's not about the moons. It's about who blinks first. You start simple. Perhaps the Empire could consider a joint stewardship agreement? No loss of face, shared access, mutual observation. The room tenses. We require contemplation, the Veil Prime says. But there's something odd in his phrasing. Not delay, hesitation. And just like that, your brain goes to work. The Empire, with all its elegance and firepower, isn't sure. Not about the treaty, about you. Some galactic historians still argue whether this was the moment it began. This hesitation, this one fraction of a second where a Terran wasn't dismissed outright. The Empire had spent centuries erecting walls of custom, ceremony, and fear. But you weren't afraid. Not because you were stronger, but because you knew the value of empathy used strategically. It was like handing a mirror to a tiger and waiting to see if it roared or ran. The Veil's translator clicks. We shall reconvene on the 6th rotation. You nod, not too deeply. No bowing, no superiority, just acknowledgement. You walk back down that impossibly long corridor, passing statues that probably outlived the last 12 species that tried this same game. You wonder if any of them had brought a smile. Back in your quarters, bare, cold, with a single translucent sleeping slab, you sit and record a silent message into your internal node. First session complete. No overt aggression. Mild disruption, triggered by microemotive display. Recommend initiating Phase 2, improvised empathy. Also, consider requesting better snacks. Galactic-grade protein paste tastes like ennui. You let the room dim around you, the soft purr of atmospheric cycling forming the closest thing to a lullaby. You're already inside the walls. And they don't know how to handle someone who isn't trying to break them, but simply listen for their creaks. Your second session begins with the air slightly warmer, not in temperature. That's still set to contempt with a hint of polar death, but in tone. You notice it right away. The guards, usually standing like furniture carved from intolerance, allow their eyes to follow you this time. They're still suspicious, but not dismissive. Suspicion you can work with. Today, the negotiation hall smells faintly of crushed minerals and something medicinal, like someone spilled antiseptic on a shrine. You take your seat on the triangular dais again. The Veil Prime does not arrive immediately. This is new. The Axid delegate pulses in quiet patterns of unreadable light. The Solari emits a low thrumming chord. It's not language, but it isn't random either. You tilt your head. So, awkward silence day? The Axid's containment orb shimmers in what might be irritation, or maybe it's trying not to laugh. Tough to tell when your colleague is a floating nerve cluster with a bad temper. The Empire calls itself the Continuum Valari, though outsiders simplify it to the Galactic Empire for convenience and sarcasm. It spans 400 systems, 63 sentient species, and one overriding philosophy. Diplomacy is deceit wearing velvet. So, they don't practice it. Not really. Sure, there are talks, treaties, gestures, but it's all theater. Everything is ceremonial, encoded nods, gestural linguistics, even the sequence in which drinks are served. And here you come, a Terran envoy with a smile, asking direct questions in casual syntax. It's like bringing a rubber duck to a chess match, which is, incidentally, how humanity won the Careen Accord. After several long minutes, the Veil Prime enters. This time, he walks slower. Not dramatically, but deliberately. A calculated delay. You nod again, same angle, same timing. Predictability can be a kind of weapon, too. Something they don't expect from humans, who've always been more jazz than orchestral. Your proposal has been tabled, his translator finally says. You raise an eyebrow. Is that a metaphor or a literal table? I'm still learning your idioms. Paused out a flicker of confusion. Then, the Solari emits a sequence of harmonic pulses, low, then rising, then trailing off into what can only be described as a musical shrug. Wait, was that mirth? Some galactic historians argue this moment broke the first seal. That by treating the Empire's ironclad rituals with lightly veiled irreverence, not insult, not disrespect, but play, you introduced something far more corrosive than rebellion, humanity, because empires don't collapse from force alone. They dissolve when the people inside them start wondering why they're still pretending the rules matter. Terran, says the Veil Prime, your species' methods remain inconsistent. That's fair, you admit, casually folding. Your hands. But inconsistency is just adaptation in motion. He doesn't answer. Not immediately. Instead, he turns, slowly, to the Axid orb. A shimmer of data passes between them in flashes invisible to most species. You see just enough to know they're arguing. About you. You take a sip of your issued hydration fluid. Still tastes like liquid despair. The room remains silent for a full 2 minutes. You know. You counted. Then the Veil Prime says something. That, by Empire standards, is both radical and alarming. We will provide additional context. You blink, voluntarily? A pause. Yes. The context arrives in the form of a document capsule, unsealed, unencrypted. It contains centuries-old border records, sensor logs, even internal memos from the Gauss Expanse region. You're not supposed to get access to these. No outsider is. But now you have them. Later, alone in your quarters, you'll scroll through those logs and realize something crucial. The Empire isn't just resisting diplomacy. It's terrified of what it might reveal. There are patterns in the data, unspoken truces, resource manipulations, forgotten wars waged on paper. It isn't lawless, but it isn't clean either. The veneer of total control masks a patchwork of quiet chaos. Rule by perception, not precision, and it's all teetering. You record another message to yourself. Empire governance model depends on opaque complexity. Introduce transparency and narrative collapse may follow. A few hours later, you walk the station's inner promenade, a spiraling corridor lined with growth columns. Alien mosses pulse with faint bioluminescence. A few attendants tend to them in silence. You pass a Veil youth, no older than 12 solar cycles, wearing an ornate ocular band. He looks at you. Just looks, then nods. It's small. It's not official. But you note it. Somewhere inside this vast, rigid structure, curiosity still leaks through. Later, as you lie on your slab, because the Empire doesn't do mattresses, you think back on the Veil Prime's phrase, additional context. That's not a diplomatic term. It's a human one. You've heard it 1,000 times in Terran offices and negotiation chambers. It implies conversation, ambiguity, even vulnerability. That they're borrowing your language now. That's dangerous. Not for you, for them. Because the moment an empire starts using the words of its enemies, it starts seeing the world through their eyes. The translator glitch tomorrow will be the crack that widens the fault. But for now, you drift to sleep with the faint whir of artificial gravity and the not-quite music of the Solaris parting chords still echoing in your mind. You're 4 minutes into the third session when it happens. A hiss, a spark, and then a long, awkward silence filled only by the faint buzzing sound of linguistic confusion. The translator pod suspended above the dais, a gleaming sphere of polished alloy and humming logic, is twitching. Yes, twitching. You glance at the Solari chorus representative. Their membranes flutter in concern. The Axid's containment orb glows erratically. The Veil Prime remains motionless, but even from across the dais, you spot the faint tremor of his second mandible joint. Alarm? Or embarrassment? A few distorted syllables sputter through the translator. Then, humanoid deception seed. Fragrant refusal logic. Error. Paradox. Compassion overload. AH.SO. It's going to be that kind of day. You clear your throat softly and lean forward. Is the machine calling me fragrant? It is. But more than that, it's broadcasting fragments of internal protocols. You're hearing partial translations. Not just of words, but of intentions. Subtle emotional variables. Interpretive weights to in other words. The translator is broken. And in doing so, it's giving you something the Empire never intended. Honesty. Recommend reinitialization. You offer helpfully, suppressing a grin. No, the Veil Prime says flatly. We continue. A pause. The Axid pulses sharply, clearly in disagreement. The Solari's membranes tighten into silence. You squint. Either the Veil wants to maintain control of the narrative, or he's daring you to use this moment. You accept. Very well. You say, leaning back, hands folded in your lap. Let's speak plainly. The translator whines again, glitching. Somewhere between tones and utters. Terran seeks relational symmetry. Probable motive. Destabilizing trust via sincerity. You turn to the Veil Prime. Is that an accusation or a compliment? He doesn't answer, but the tip of his spine bristle shifts. Another tell. The next few minutes are chaos and slow motion. Everyone speaks cautiously, parsing each word through a broken system that distorts their meaning just enough to be fascinating. The Solari hums. Harmony breached, but resonance remains. Adaptation required. The Axid replies in blinking pulses, and the pod translates with unsettling clarity. Human patterns unpredictable. Threat profile downgraded from aggressive to corrosive. Corrosive, that's a new one. Like a polite acid, you say, smiling. I've been called worse. For the first time, the translator doesn't glitch. It says, evenly. Statement detected, self-aware charm. Some galactic historians say this moment marks the beginning of the soft spiral, the slow, irreversible collapse of imperial control, not through revolution, but through revelation. Not because a machine broke, but because no one tried to stop it. Eventually, a maintenance unit is summoned. A squat, eight-legged drone scuttles across the dais and tugs the translator offline. The silence that follows is thick, strangely peaceful. You speak without it now. You ask. The Veil Prime nods once. We understand your dialect. We have always understood it. AH.S. The translator was never for comprehension. It was a filter, a buffer, a way to sanitize nuance, blunt emotion, preserve protocol. Without it, you are dangerous. The Solari chorus unfurls part of its membranous sleeve, vibrating lightly in your direction. Terran envoy, it sings. What do you wish from the Empire? A question so direct it practically rattles the walls. You pause. The Empire expects a demand. A trade. A measurable concession. So, you offer something far worse. I want you to understand that fear isn't the only option. A silence follows. The Axid orb dims to a low, unreadable glow. The Veil Prime finally turns to you, and though his face is unreadable by Terran standards, you catch something in his stillness. Confusion, perhaps. Or doubt. Good that you've done more damage in one broken session than 100 fleets ever could. Later, back in your quarters, your internal message node hums softly as you log the day's events. Translator glitch created involuntary transparency. Recommend maintaining vulnerability vector. Empire elites appear shaken but not reactive yet. Will proceed with linguistic destabilization through idiomatic variances. You add a side note. Also, Axid descriptor, corrosive, unexpectedly flattering. Might use it on new business cards. That night, sleep comes slowly. You lie on your side, staring at the slow spin of the stars through your room's narrow viewport, wondering how many other worlds have fallen not to fire, but to words they didn't know how to answer. Empires rarely expect truth to be dangerous. And yet, here you are. The fourth session starts with drinks, not metaphoric ones. Actual beverages, served in elegant ovoid flasks designed to look like dewdrops on obsidian. The diplomatic equivalent of, let's just relax and not declare war for 5 minutes. You're handed a silver sheen orb by a mechanical server with too many elbows. It bows. You nod. The Axid gets a vapor-based concentrate, the Solari a resonance-infused mist, and the Veil Prime, curiously, accepts a simple mineral infusion. It's rare to see him ingest anything at all. A drink offering is ceremonial. But today it feels tentative. Shall we toast? You offer, lifting your flask. The Solari emits a tentative harmonic trill. Acknowledgement. The Axid pulses, slowly, carefully. The Veil Prime blinks once. To what purpose? You consider. To beginnings we didn't plan, you say? And endings we don't yet understand. Another blink. Then he lifts his flask. Some galactic historians argue this moment, a simple toast, was the Empire's first act of unregulated behavior in over 7 centuries. An unscripted exchange. A vulnerability. The translator pod has not been replaced. You're all operating without it now, talking through shared language or shared intent. You sip. The drink is cold, citrus-like, but layered with something mineral. Sharp. You cough softly. Terran physiology appears compromised. The Veil remarks dryly. Terran pride remains intact. You reply. The Solari hums a soft chord that's almost a chuckle. And just like that, something shifts. You lean forward. There's a word in our culture, serendipity. It means an unexpected but happy accident. A mistake that turns out to be a gift. The Axid's lights flicker. You refer to the translation failure. Exactly, you say? If your translator hadn't malfunctioned, I'd still be speaking through a filter. You'd still be hiding behind your roles. But now, we're real. The veil considers this. Mistakes cause instability. Sure, you nod. But they also let air in. You take a breath. The moment is too perfect. You go for it. You know, our species almost destroyed itself before we figured out how to talk to each other. We developed weapons faster than wisdom, spoke louder than we listened. But eventually, we learned that the sharpest blade in diplomacy is vulnerability. Some blades turn inward, the veil says, some become bridges. Silence follows. Then the Solari hums again, a chord of cautious curiosity. You lean into the opening. We don't want to control your empire. We don't want your systems, your moons, or your protocols. We want a galaxy that functions without fear. Another long pause. The axis shifts slightly in its orb, close enough to indicate unease, not retreat. Then, the Veil Prime utters a phrase no Terran diplomat has ever recorded from a sitting member of the Galactic Council. Fear is the spine of structure. You blink. That's one way to build an empire, you say. But it's not the only way to hold it. And then, the unexpected happens. The Veil Prime finishes his drink, fully a symbolic gesture so taboo that you hear a low, alert tone echo from the chamber walls. The room registers what's just occurred. The highest-ranking member of the Empire's diplomatic caste has accepted and completed a Terran ritual. Not just tolerated it, participated. He places the empty orb on the dais and looks at you. We will consider multiple spines. It's awkward, clumsy, even, but revolutionary in empires like this. Language ossifies. Tradition becomes armor. And armor, while strong, rarely flexes that you've introduced flex. Later, as you walk the outer rings of the station, surrounded by floating orbs of gravity-fluxed fauna, pulsing with dim alien light, you pass a group of junior delegates. They pretend not to see you, but one drops a small token as you passed, a carved trinket, shaped like a crescent folded over a flame. You recognize it, the symbol of thrall reflection, an old Veil philosophy banned centuries ago. It was the idea that an empire should reflect its people, not contain them. You pick up the token and turn it over in your hand. Somewhere, quiet rebellions are beginning. Not with riots. With tokens. With drinks. With small nods and serendipitous accidents. Back in your quarters, your internal log entry reads, toast executed. Cultural boundaries momentarily breached. Veil consumed Terran fluid willingly. Recommend cataloging this under unprecedented openings. Side note, taste of citrus nickel drink lingers. Request full toxicology report, or at least a better mixer. You sit on the edge of your slab, spinning the thrall token between your fingers, wondering how many empires died because they refused to accept a glass when it was offered. Because sometimes peace doesn't come with fanfare. Sometimes it clinks softly in crystal. You're not supposed to be alone with the Veil Prime. Technically, every interaction between you and any high-ranking member of the Continuum Valari is meant to be observed, documented, and filtered through no fewer than 5 layers of ceremonial oversight. So, naturally, when he gestures for you to follow him, alone, through a side corridor laced with quiet shadows and suspended crystalline fixtures, you obliged. He says nothing at first. The corridor narrows into a gravity garden, one of the Empire's older meditative spaces. Thick vines coil along the walls, roots floating freely in zero-G pools. The light shifts as you enter, filtered through a layer of bioluminescent algae. That gives everything a soft, underwater glow. It's beautiful. You catch a faint floral scent, like lavender and rust. The garden's oxygen is richer here, meant for slow breathing and long thinking. Do you know why this place still exists? He asks, his voice free of the usual clipped, ceremonial modulation. You shake your head gently. Didn't know it. Did. He moves to a curved bench and gestures for you to sit. You do. Carefully. This chamber predates the Empire, he says. Before the Continuum Valari, before even the Council. It was built by the Aurelin, the last species to attempt diplomacy with us. You feel your spine straighten just a little. What happened to them? Their offer was too honest, he says. We crushed their worlds and wrote them out of our history. You're quiet for a beat. And yet this place remains. He doesn't respond. But the silence feels deliberate. Weighted, you notice a small sculpture in the center of the chamber, a pair of interlocking orbs, one bright silver, one matte black. They spin slowly in opposing directions. It's a meditation device, he says, designed to remind the viewer that opposing truths can still revolve around the same axis. A whisper of rebellion, carved in metal, you glance at him. Why? Show me this. He exhales, if you can call it that. A slow tightening of his thoracic plates. Because you see things others ignore. You use mistakes as leverage. And you disarm us with simplicity. You smile faintly. We're not trying to disarm you. No, he agrees. You are trying to unmask us. He says it like a revelation. Not an accusation. You lean back. Sometimes masks aren't protection. Sometimes they're just what we forget we're wearing. The Veil Prime watches the spinning orbs. The Empire is not a creature of truth. It is a machine of perception. And perception cannot breathe transparency. Until it does, you say he stands. The Goss Expanse proposal will be considered. You blink. Seriously? He nods once. I will submit it for internal debate. Quietly. Which, in Empire speak, means he'll risk a fracture in the ruling council. You'll take heat for this. I will take silence if I can secure it. That is more dangerous. He leaves without another word. You remain, watching the garden lights shift, thinking about the Aurelin, lost to fire and erasure, but remembered here, in quiet roots and polished stone. Some galactic historians still debate what was said in that garden. The Empire never recorded it. You never gave an official statement, but the sculpture, the twin orbs, reappeared later in strange places. On rebel stations. In protest art. Even once in a Terran diplomatic mural that mysteriously vanished from the Unity archives. Symbols matter. That night, as you return to your quarters, you find a folded square of woven alloy on your slab. A sigil burned into the surface. One circle, cracked through the middle, with threads spilling outward. A message. Someone knows what you're doing. And they're agreeing. You log your report in silence. Private audience with Veil Prime. Confidential disclosures suggest internal fracture. Initiated symbolic resonance via Aurelin relic. Goss Expanse proposal may gain traction. Optional tag. Note. Empire Gardens have better lighting than every Terran. Embassy combined. Suggest horticultural exchange program. You drift off to sleep wondering how long it will take before someone else enters that garden. Not to reflect, but to rebel. You're not technically invited to the tribunal. That's because the tribunal isn't technically happening. Officially, it's listed as a closed procedural recalibration of interspecies engagement parameters, which is the Empire's way of saying, let's yell at each other in private and pretend it's progress. But you're still summoned. You step into the chamber and immediately feel the shift, like someone replaced the air with gelatin and tension. The walls are darker here, absorbing sound. The lighting is engineered to cast subtle shadows under the eyes, emphasizing solemnity and fatigue. Theater, always theater. 12 figures are seated in a crescent configuration. 3 from the Valari. Inner Council, 2 Solari advisors, 1 Axid moderator, and several robed observers whose function seems to be making you feel vaguely unwelcome if there's no chair for you. Of course, you remain standing. Center stage. The Veil Prime is not present. Curious. One of the robed figures leans forward. A female veil with voice like tempered glass. You have introduced variables, she says without greeting. I thought that was the point. You reply evenly. Discussion. Consideration. Maybe a shared drink or two. No one laughs. The Axid moderator pulses. The translation malfunction has created cultural bleed. Terminology has deviated. Concepts have drifted. Ah, you say? You're upset because you accidentally started understanding me. The glass-voiced veil tilts her head. Empathy is corrosive. That's not a new opinion, you counter. It's just suddenly inconvenient. A silence follows. Heavy, but not empty. The Solari advisors begin a low harmonic duet. Unusual, even for them. It takes a moment to process, but the meaning becomes clear. An evaluation is taking place. A harmonic audit of your emotional footprint on the room. Ancient Solari diplomacy technique. Rare and risky. You hold still. Let them listen. 1 finishes the phrase with a long, trailing vibration. Then speaks. This human is not lying. He believes what he says, even when he uses humor. The other adds, and he regrets nothing. That one earns you a few narrowed eyes. You sigh, letting your voice drop to a conversational cadence. You're treating me like a contagion, but I'm just a mirror. I didn't invent your contradictions. I just didn't flinch when I saw them. The glass-voiced veil leans back. And what is it you want, Taryn? You paused at it's a question. You've answered before, but never to a room like this. I want your empire to survive, you say, but not as a ghost wrapped in protocol. As something alive, honest, capable of trust. That is not survival, says the Axid, blinking. Once, that is evolution. You can feel it, the air warping, not from temperature, but from pressure. Philosophical friction. Some galactic historians later argued that this closed session was never about evaluating you. It was about evaluating each other. Your presence merely provided the stimulus, because empires, like stars, collapse inward. First, eventually, one of the silent observers speaks. A whispery voice. Old. Dusty. You smiled during your first meeting. I did. Why? You shrug lightly. Because I was glad to be here. She looks at you for a long time. We have not seen gladness in centuries. You let the silence stretch. Let it mean something. Then she adds, you may go. You. Leave. Your footsteps echoing faintly. No applause. No shouting. Just acknowledgement. Outside the tribunal chamber, you stand alone in a quiet passageway. A small cleaning drone glides past, playing a soft tonal hum, an old Axid lullaby, repurposed as maintenance code. You smile. Later, in your quarters, you log the event. Unscheduled tribunal session initiated. Emotional resonance testing confirms. Impact. Solari harmonics verify sincerity. Suggested shift. Terran traits being reevaluated not as threats, but as variables. Potential vector. Emotional diplomacy. You consider adding a joke, but decide against it. This one needs to stand as is. Instead, you record a voice memo. Not for the archive, just for yourself. Day. I've lost count. I stood in a room of 12 stone-faced aliens and told them I cared. And they listened. That might be the strangest thing I've done since I accidentally won that staring contest with a void jellyfish ambassador. You pause, then add, softly, still not blinking. As you lie back on the slab, the lights fade gradually. Standard cycle, but you keep your eyes open. Empathy is a weapon now, and you just showed them how to aim it. The Empire is unraveling, one twitch at a time. You notice it first in the veil prime. It's subtle. A tiny tremor in the muscles beneath his left eye. More specifically, the third microlid that most species don't even know the Valari have. It quivers when he disagrees with something he cannot argue against. You catch it during a quiet logistics meeting. One of those sessions where empires talk about shipping lanes and you pretend not to notice they're actually discussing resource dominance. Goss expands trade distribution must prioritize core systems. The Prime says, you counter, gently, which implies the frontier systems are expendable. Is that the Empire's position? Twitch, barely there. Gone in a blink, but you file it away. To most, the Veil Prime is unreadable. Polished. Engineered for precision and detachment. But you've spent enough time across the table to detect micropatterns. Tiny deviations. The blink rate when challenged. The way his hand lingers slightly longer near the edge of a datapad when he's uncertain. Empires aren't defeated by great uprisings. They die from within, from the cracks their own architects never noticed that you're watching one now. Over the next few sessions, the twitch returns. In meetings, in silent walks, even during a ceremonial blessing of the diplomatic station's star-aligned core, every time you speak with him, not at him, but with him, the tremor appears. Then something stranger happens. He starts to speak less, not out of control, but caution. He's thinking more, reflecting. The role of Supreme Sovereign isn't designed for reflection. It's designed for assertion. For certainty, you are eroding that point. One question. One pause. One tilted head at a time. One day, mid-session, he asks. You something entirely off script. What does your species fear most? It catches you off guard. But only for a second. Isolation. You reply, not just being alone, but being misunderstood, screaming across a void and hearing nothing back. He nods, once, no enemy, no ally, just silence. There's a long pause. Then he says, quietly, we have built our entire civilization on that silence. You meet his gaze. then maybe it's time to listen to the echoes. Some galactic historians claim this conversation, simple, unadorned, marked the turning point. Not the treaty, not the rebellion. This moment, when the most powerful voice in the galaxy started asking human questions. The ripple effect is immediate. Within days, delegation seating arrangements shift. Nothing official, but small changes. The Solari now angle their membranes toward you instead of away. The Axid's containment orb hovers slightly closer to your side of the dais. One of the junior Valari actually laughs, out loud, at something. You say.it wasn't even a good joke. You logged the moment anyway. Observed facial microtremor pattern in Veil Prime during contradiction exposure. Psychological armor deteriorating. Initiated unstructured query protocol. Produced introspection. Recommend cautious continuation. Imperial roles showing stress under conversational load. Later, you visit the observation deck. No one joins you. It's always empty. Diplomats rarely pause to appreciate stars. Through the curved glass, the galaxy stretches like a wound made of light. You place your hand on the cool surface and wonder how many empires have stared at this view and mistaken awe for dominion. Behind you, footsteps, soft, measured. The Veil Prime stands beside you. Says nothing. You both watch the stars. Eventually, he speaks. I envy your species. You raise an eyebrow. That's unexpected. You laugh in the face of extinction. You debate during crisis. You find beauty in failure. We don't. Always, you say? But we try. Another twitch. But this one's not in his eye. It's in his voice, soft. Almost human. You say nothing more. Neither does he. Somewhere beyond the glass, a comet passes silently, trailing ice and memory. Empires fear laughter because it implies distance. Perspective, the ability to see power as something temporary. Fragile that you've shown them the twitch in their own reflection, and it's growing. It starts with syrup. You didn't mean for it to be subversive. You just wanted to offer a gesture, a bit of cultural exchange. So, before the next meeting, you have a small Terran gift box delivered to each delegate's chamber. Inside, a tiny glass bottle of Real maple syrup, cold-packed and sealed against cosmic pressure. For you, it's nostalgia. For them, it's a diplomatic incident. By midday, the Continuum Valari has issued a formal ethics query to its own legal counsel. Does the unsolicited gifting of a sugar-based Earth extract constitute a violation of Article 7, subsection F, of the 338th Treaty of Culinary Boundaries? Apparently, yes, but it's too late. The bottles have been opened. One Solari dipped a neural filament in it. The Axid subjected it to spectroscopic analysis and reportedly described the flavor signature as haunting. One Valari just one, drank it, then asked for another. You receive a summons to appear before the Diplomatic Review Board again. But this time, there's no accusation, just confusion. You have weaponized sweetness. The moderator says, utterly deadpan you. Raise your hands. I thought you might enjoy it. The Valari cultural officer, a sallow-skinned administrator whose eyes don't blink so much as reset, leans in. You do realize maple syrup violates our ancestral salt protocols, yes? Genuinely, I do not. You've introduced a liquid contradiction. You suppress a laugh. That's honestly the best description I've heard all month. The salt protocols, as it turns out, date back millennia. The Valari constructed large portions of their social contract around mineral equilibrium. The flavor spectrum isn't just cuisine, it's law. Salt is governance. Bitter is penance. Sweet is sedition, and you've just uncorked it at breakfast, some. Galactic historians mark this moment as symbolic. The day a Terran broke an ancient cultural paradigm not through force or negotiation, but pancake topping. Because now, the Empire has to make a choice. They can ban the syrup, thus admitting they're afraid of it, or they can allow it, thus acknowledging that maybe, just maybe, not everything outside their doctrines is dangerous. By week's end, 2 more delegates have requested refills. The Solari chorus incorporates the taste into a vibrational recipe used for internal harmonics. You're told it adds melancholy with notes of earth longing. The Axid orb flashes a quiet message to your console. Acceptable corruption. Approved. And the Veil Prime? He doesn't comment publicly. But one morning, you enter the negotiation chamber and find a small dish waiting at your seat. Inside, a mineral wafer, delicately spiraled, drizzled with syrup, and no name. No signature, but the placement is precise. Only the Prime could have arranged it. Empires fall not from battles, but from breach points, moments where certainty is pierced by curiosity that you've offered them sweetness in a system addicted to salt. That night, you log the event. Minor diplomatic disruption caused by cultural artifact, maple syrup, provoked historical conflict with salt protocols. Outcome, mixed resistance and intrigue. Observed philosophical stress in Valari continuity logic. Status, delicious. You add a side note. Potential for cultural outreach via Terran cuisine. Suggest future interventions involving hot chocolate or grilled cheese. Investigate risk of unintended revolutions. You drift off to sleep with a strange sense of satisfaction, because in the end, diplomacy isn't always forged with treaties. Sometimes, it begins with breakfast. It happens in the middle of a logistics review that you're diagramming a shared port access rotation. Nothing thrilling, just a low-orbit dance of cargo lanes and waiting times, when one of the Solari lets out a tone that cuts through the room. Like a violin string snapping mid-concert, the room freezes, the accid orb flashes yellow, a universal sign of social disorientation. A Valari aide drops a stylus. The Veil Prime looks slowly, very slowly, at the Solari representative, whose membranes are trembling that you'd think something had gone terribly wrong. But no, the Solari is laughing. Not musically, not symbolically, actually laughing. A wheezy, multi-tonal warble that, according to every diplomatic database, has not occurred within the Empire in over 700 years. You stared. It's hard not to. Was it something I said? You ask cautiously. The Solari gestures with a rippling membrane. You described the border queues as a cosmic DMV staffed by nihilists. You blink. You had that IT was a throwaway comment. An Earth reference. A grumble wrapped in gallows humor. But something about it cut through the ceremonial haze, made the absurdity of the entire system feel real. The Veil Prime's mandibles twitch. You catch it. For a moment, it seems like he might object, might restore order, but instead, he simply says, explain. DMV. Oh no. You do your best. You talk about Earth's Department of Motor Vehicles, about fluorescent lighting and endless forms, about waiting in line to wait in line, about the fundamental human experience of being forgotten in a room built for numbers. The Solari nearly falls out of its resonance chair. The accid orb rotates 3 degrees counterclockwise, then emits a brief ping, the accid version of a shrug. And then, unbelievably, the Veil Prime exhales a short burst of air through his nasal spiracles. The diplomatic AI notes it as non-aggressive spasm of breath. It's a laugh, muted, hesitant, but real. You realize, in that moment, that you've crossed yet another line. Not one drawn in policy or protocol, but one etched into the heart of the Empire's self-image. Laughter, here, is antithetical, a glitch in the code of reverence. Empires like this one are held together by solemnity, by the unshakable belief that they are the axis upon which the galaxy turns. And nothing dismantles that belief faster than laughter, because to laugh is to see the system from the outside, and to admit that it might be silly. Some galactic historians call this moment the comedic breach. Others refer to it as the DMV incident. Either way, it spreads. Within 2 days, a Solari aide composes a tonal poem based on Terran workplace satire. Within 5, a junior Valari is reprimanded for circulating a holographic meme involving a cargo drone and a sarcastic toaster. And within 7, the Empire issues an internal advisory. All humor-related transmissions from the Terran envoy must be reviewed for destabilizing content. You print that one out. Frame it. That night, back in your quarters, you receive an encrypted packet. No sender ID. Inside is a 3-second audio clip. The Solari's laugh. Raw. Unfiltered. In stereo, you listen to it on loop. Not because it's funny, because it's impossible, and it happened anyway. You log your report. Unexpected laughter event. Triggered by cultural idiom. Broke centuries-old solemnity protocol. Resulting effects. Social destabilization. Minor philosophical collapse. Tonal poetry. Valari response, mixed. Solari response, unrestrained. Accid response, tolerant bemusement, you. Add a private note, weaponized comedy now viable. Exercise with caution. You fall asleep with the sound of the Solari's laughter still echoing through your mind, like a chime caught in a gravity welled out a soft, joyous crack in the hull of Empire. The summit hall has been redesigned overnight. You notice it the moment you walk in. The dais has shifted by precisely 22 centimeters clockwise. Not enough for most species to perceive. But you've spent enough time in these sessions to spot the change instantly. It's not arbitrary. Somebody's tilting the room. You glance around. The delegates enter as usual, each drifting to their seats. But the energy feels off-axis, like a painting that's been rehung just a little too low. And everyone's too polite, or too afraid, to point it out. You take your usual position, and the Solari representative nods, then repositions its resonance cushion a few degrees to compensate for the new angle. The Axid orb hovers unsteadily, adjusting its altitude with minute pulses. The Veil Prime stands at the edge of the dais longer than usual before sitting. Every member of this council, trained, bred, or engineered to operate within perfect geometric formality, is now slightly uncomfortable. You'd almost feel guilty if it weren't so effective. See, this wasn't your idea. But it was your fault. Last week, during an informal meal you somehow turned into a roundtable on spatial ergonomics. You made an offhand comment. Humans negotiate better when the chairs aren't facing directly forward. It softens the hierarchy. Apparently, someone listened, and now, the summit room listens. You're watching soft power in motion. Not the blaring of dominance, but the hum of influence. It's the difference between knocking down a door and leaving it ajar so the wind can do the rest. Even the gravity feels slightly different. Another adjustment. Subtle shifts in microtorque mean some species have to reorient their chairs, their posture, even their thought patterns. Your species thrives in flexibility. Does not. Today's session is about shared orbital routes, again, but the conversation, curiously, moves faster. Less posturing, fewer verbal traps. It's as if the room itself is encouraging cooperation. That's when it hits you. The Empire built these chambers as instruments of intimidation. Precision, symmetry, dominance, every line and curve designed to assert superiority. But you, with one casual comment, altered the environment just enough to make them uncomfortable in their own home. It's like inviting someone to a dinner party, then slowly replacing their silverware with chopsticks. Not hostile, just unfamiliar. And unfamiliarity breeds thought. The Veil Prime speaks. This revised configuration, is it intentional? You smile gently. I don't know. Is your agreement with the Axid on Gauss Route 7B intentional? He stares, then blinks, then, tiny twitch, looks away. The Axid orb pulses in surprise. The Solari hums a sharp harmonic. No one was supposed to know about that side deal. And yet, here you are, using spatial inference to throw the room off balance. Literally and diplomatically, but it's not a trick. It's a tactic, and the more they speak in adjusted tones, adjusted postures, adjusted gravities, the more they begin to question the frame they've operated in for centuries. Some galactic historians will later call this the tilted chamber incident. Others will argue the summit hall shift was pure accident. But most agree, this was when the council's structure, its literal shape, began to fragment. That you've shifted more than seats, that you've shifted reference. After the meeting, as the delegates file out, the Veil Prime pauses beside you. You have altered the terrain. You glance around innocently. I didn't touch anything. He says nothing, but he nods once. That rare, slow gesture of acknowledgement that only shows up when an empire realizes it may no longer be the center of its own orbit. Later, in your quarters, you log the event. Unscheduled spatial realignment in Summit Chamber resulted in softened hierarchy, reduced rhetorical conflict. Delegates exhibited signs of spatial distress and behavioral adaptation. Secondary result, exposure of hidden alliance. Side note, Earth proverb, tilt the table, change the game. Should translate well with minor metaphor adjustments. You pour yourself a small drink, non-sedative, lightly carbonated, and sit in the dark, watching the distant stars drift. Somewhere in the galaxy, gravity follows mass. Here, it follows influence. And yours is growing. You draft the treaty in complete silence and no assistance. No translators. No glowing council spheres offering corrections from 12 centuries of precedent. Just you, a blank interface, and a faint ambient hum that sounds suspiciously like an old refrigerator. It's the first time the Empire has ever permitted a non-imperial party to initiate language on sacred parchment, digitally rendered or not. But it wasn't permission so much as resignation. You suspect they're trying to trap you. That anything you write will be dissected and fed back through 100 lenses until the meaning dies, like a whisper inside a cathedral. So you do something they don't expect. You don't write words. You gesture them. Literally, the treaty you compose is a series of posture diagrams, spatial inflection indicators, and micro-expressions. You draw each clause with movement. Eyebrow lifts, chin tilts, shoulder shifts. You record them with precision. The angle, the duration, the rhythm of each pause. No speech. No translation, just presence. You call it the agreement of mutual observation. Each side consents not to act, not to speak, but to be seen. To exist in the same space without violence for 6 standard cycles. To acknowledge each other bodily, and only then decide if further words are warranted. It's absurd, it's art. And the Empire signs it. The Veil Prime meets you in a neutral observation bay, chosen specifically for its blank walls and gravity-neutral core. You stand 10 paces apart. Neither of you speaks. You raise your left hand to shoulder height that he responds by opening his third mandible, precisely 12 degrees. You nod once that he nods twice. An elevation, and the treaty activates. Some galactic historians nearly lost their minds when the footage leaked. They couldn't agree if it was diplomacy, performance art, or a sophisticated insult disguised as sincerity, but on paper, and in practice, the treaty held. For 6 cycles, no aggression, no demands, just observation. It rippled across the outer systems like a strange and fragile wave. Patrol ships paused in mid-route. Generals halted drills, unsure whether to shoot or salute the Empire's farthest border. A military cruiser received only a silent visual of a Terran pilot making the prescribed treaty gesture through cockpit glass. The Valari ship lowered its shields, not because they trusted the gesture, but because they didn't know how to respond to it. And the unknown, in diplomacy, can be more powerful than a threat. You return from the observation bay to find your console blinking with a new message. TO, Terran Envoy. From Secondary Strategic Subdirector, Anonymous. Subject, Gesture Clause. Comment. Our ancestors would weep at this insult. I watched it 10 times. I believe I am weeping now. Proceed. You smile. That's basically a blessing. You log the treaty. Drafted agreement of mutual observation. Nonverbal. Treaty utilizing kinesthetic protocol. Signed via synchronized gestures. Outcome. 0 aggression events during period. Secondary effects. Spread of mimicry gestures across border systems. Potential mimetic resonance. And under private notes. Empire. Blinked. Literally. Twice. That evening. You walk past the training concourse and notice a junior Valaria officer practicing your shoulder tilt in front of a reflective surface. He isn't mocking you. He's studying. You don't interrupt. Instead, you keep walking, hands folded behind your back, wondering what happens when a civilization built on posture and power begins to learn a new grammar, one where stillness speaks louder than steel. The news doesn't arrive with fanfare. There are no alarms, no proclamations, no galaxy-shattering broadcasts. Just a quiet whisper passed through encrypted networks, political backchannels, and oddly poetic shipping manifests. The outer worlds are refusing orders. Not loudly, not violently, just not responding. Command packets from the Continuum Valari reach their destinations. Confirmed. Authenticated. But nothing returns. No acknowledgements. No compliance. No resistance either. It's as if the fringes of the Empire have collectively decided to wait. To hold their breath that you're in the middle of a review session on planetary trade tariffs when the Veil Prime receives the report. You watch it unfold in real time. The faint glimmer in his ocular lens. The subtle stiffening of his dorsal plates. The pause. One heartbeat too long. Before he resumes reading. Is there a problem? You ask gently, as if inquiring about a scratch on the floor. He doesn't answer, but the Solari responds. There is dissonance in the outer rings. You nod. The edges always feel the change first. Later, In your quarters, a junior attaché from the Axid faction appears without an appointment. Unthinkable just a week ago. They hover uncertainly before finally blurting out. They're copying your treaty. You blink. Which one? All of them. In pieces. Improvised versions. Some don't even use words anymore. You lean forward. So they're not fighting? No, the Axid says. They're just not complying. It's quiet rebellion. Peaceful nonconformity. And it's spreading faster than protocol can contain it. Because belief doesn't need authorization. It just needs a mirror. Some galactic historians argue this moment, when the first Valari outer colony refused a direct command without explanation, was the actual collapse. Not the council vote, not the declarations. Just this soft, seismic shift where silence became more powerful than a fleet. They're not defecting to humanity, they're defecting to possibility. The idea that there's a way to live without fear, without rigidity, without being compressed into postures of performance. You didn't ask for this, but it's happening. One by one, distant outposts stop calling home. They begin referencing Earth metaphors in coded comms. A mining vessel sends in its quarterly report written entirely in Terran poetic meter. A Valari port station greets incoming freighters with the human phrase, "Take a load off." And always, at the end, we observe. We do not engage. The words from your silent treaty, mutual observation, have become a rallying cry. You walk the garden halls that evening, passing a group of junior diplomats in quiet conversation. As you pass, one of them, Valari, young, unadorned, offers you a slight nod, but not the Empire's nod. Your nod, the one from your first negotiation. Subtle, unassuming, shared, you nod back. Later that night, your console blinks with a message, anonymous. Encrypted. We don't want to break the Empire. We just don't want it breathing down our necks. We want air. You don't reply, you just file it in your growing archive titled, Peace. Accidentally your daily log reads. Confirmed non-compliance across 3 outer sectors. Orders unacknowledged, not defied. Cultural spread of Terran treaty ideology observed. Mimetic behavior consistent with early-stage ideological adoption. Resistance mode. Passive. Status. Exponential drift. Private note. I said take a load off to a Valari and wasn't vaporized. New record. You lie awake longer than usual, not in anxiety, but in awe, because you've seen uprisings before, on Earth and beyond. They usually roar, burn, shatter. This one is different. This one spreads in quiet. It unfolds not in conquest, but in permission, and once permission spreads, control is no longer mandatory. It's optional. The first rebellion doesn't start with a bang. It begins with a whisper, a folded flag, a silence where there used to be salutes. It starts on the moon of Kareth Vale, a former mining colony turned administrative outpost at the edge of the continuum. The report you receive is brief and unsettlingly poetic. The command center remains intact. Systems operational. But no one is answering. You scroll further. Personnel are present. Ships remain docked. Doors are unlocked. But the offices are empty, not abandoned, unattended. Like everyone just stood up at once and walked quietly into the forest. The Empire sends in an inspection unit. They find the facility stocked, the reports up to date, and a handwritten message left on the command table. We do not defect. We do not resist. We simply choose not to play. It's unsigned, but beside it lies a single object, a datapad displaying a looped hollow of you, standing silently in the garden beside the Veil Prime, performing the opening gesture of the agreement. Of mutual observation, you never authorized that transmission, which means someone did, and the signal is spreading. Across the next 2 cycles, similar incidents ripple through the edges of Empire territory. Whole outposts fall silent, not from sabotage, but consent withdrawal. Crews show up for duty. They run maintenance. They file logs. But they no longer enforce the NO patrols. No threats. No demonstrations. Just folded arms and muted eyes. You hear stories. A Valari communications director who plays Solari laughter tones on internal frequencies until the whole station begins humming along. An Axid logistics hive that starts transmitting food shipments without asking for Imperial clearance. A border station that installs a plaque above the docking bay. No flag. Just the words, "We're not against you. We're just done pretending." Some galactic historians call this era the soft descent. Others prefer the quiet drift. But everyone agrees. Nothing could have prepared the continuum for this kind of rebellion, because it doesn't give them a villain, and empires need villains like lungs need air. The Valari High Council convenes an emergency summit to address doctrinal erosion. You're not invited, but 3 delegates contact you afterward. Not officially, of course. Just informal messages. Point 1 says, they listen to you, more than to us. Another asks, is this what you wanted? And the third doesn't write anything. They just send a single gesture clip, shoulder tilt, hand, rise, gaze softened. Your own body language mirrored back to you. You stand in your room longer than you mean to, staring at the message, wondering how a movement so massive can feel so quiet. And then it hits you. This isn't rebellion, that it's a reframing, that they're not leaving the empire, that they're editing it. They're choosing which parts to carry forward and which to drop like old skin. They're not running away from power. They're ignoring it until it fades from relevance. In the hallway outside your quarters, someone passes you and whispers, your silence is louder than our orders. You don't turn. You just keep walking. Because if you look back now, you'll see the cracks forming faster than you're ready to admit. You file your report that night without a word. You simply title it, Observation 913, Peace by Refusal. And underneath, you type, we always thought change required noise. Maybe we were wrong. You don't sleep much. Not because you're afraid, but because you know, deep down, that when an empire's people stop obeying, not out of anger but from apathy, the fall isn't coming, that it's already here. The final council breakfast is unusually quiet, not solemn, not ceremonial, just quiet. You arrive early, not to posture, but to observe. The dining hall is warmer than usual, lit with low amber glows and lined with translucent flora imported from Solari Reef planets. The long central table is still set for 15, though only 9 seats are occupied to NO guards. No aides. No hover recorders humming behind the scenes. It's just them and you. You help yourself to the spread, bitter fruit, steam-cured root discs, and something that might be either a pastry or a preserved mollusk. Hard to tell. You set a small tin of Earth-style butter next to it anyway. The Veil Prime enters last, not late. Just not first. His gait is slower today. Not heavy, but unguarded. You recognize it from Terran history books. It's the walk of someone who has stopped defending and started remembering. He sits, not at the head of the table, but across from you. No1 speaks. And then, almost sheepishly, a junior Solari delegate places a small ceramic tray on the table. Toast, Terran toast. Slightly burnt, unevenly buttered. You don't know where they got it, but you nod. They nod back. Someone giggles. Actually giggles. You can't tell who. The Veil Prime clears his throat, not to command, not to open discussion, but because his species has no word for awkward. You decide to break the silence. So, what's next? It hangs there, the question of questions. The one nobody dares ask out loud, because this isn't a session. It isn't a summit, that it's a finale. Some galactic historians will argue that no real decisions were made during this breakfast, that no treaties were signed, no titles revoked, no decrees issued. But those historians never saw the body language. They never saw what didn't happen. No orders given, no rebuttals posed, no1 declared victory. Instead, the Valari finance director simply stands, folds her ceremonial sash, and places it gently in the center of the table. A resignation. Then a Solari archivist sets their tuning crystal beside it. Then an Axid flickers dark for 4 full seconds. Enough to signal institutional discontinuance. No words. No debates. Just returns. You sip from your drink and watch as centuries of rigid structure dissolve like sugar in warm tea. When the Veil Prime finally speaks, it is with the voice of a man who has already outlived the monument built in his name. The continuum dissolves itself. Just like that. No explosions. No uprisings. Just a few old diplomats having breakfast and agreeing, silently, that they're done. You nod, not to gloat, but to witness, because that's all you were ever meant to do. Not conquer. Not infiltrate. Just be here long enough that they started seeing themselves through your eyes. Somewhere, in the background hum of the room, a breakfast drone tries and fails to butter a piece of toast. It slides off, plops onto the tray, and wobbles pitifully. You snort. The Solari emits a single amused tone. Even the Veil Prime smiles. For real this time that you've watched regimes rise, collapse, and reshape across your career. But this is new. This is grace. You finish your toast, one bite at a time, and slide your empty plate forward. The meeting ends when the last cup is emptied. N01 calls it to order. N01 records the moment. And yet, by the next cycle, the news will have spread across systems. The Empire is no longer the Empire that it's just history now. Later, in your quarters, your final log reads, breakfast session, unscheduled structural resignation, Valari, Axid, Solari, coordinated withdrawal from formal governance. Atmosphere, gentle. Conclusion, dissolution of central authority through mutual quiet. You hesitate, then add, I brought toast to a galactic collapse. And it worked. You exhale softly. Outside your viewport, the stars look the same, but you know better. You leave the way you arrived, alone to no procession, no flare of imperial trumpets, no admiral's escort flanking your diplomatic shuttle. The Valari station offers you a standard departure clearance and a small silent nod from the docking bay officer who once refused to make eye contact. Even the corridor lights seem softer now, as if the station knows it no longer has to intimidate. You carry only a single case, no relics. No weapons, just documents. Treaties drafted in silence. Gesture charts. A few awkward jokes that somehow reshaped centuries of doctrine. One of them still smells faintly like maple. Your boots echo lightly across the embarkation gantry. You look once more at the towering spires of the station, the same ones that seemed so menacing on your first day. Now, they just look tired, or maybe at peace. The Veil Prime does not see you off, but he doesn't have to, because when you reach your shuttle door, you find something taped to the hull. Not by protocol, not by code by hand, that it's a simple piece of cloth, gray, neutral, but folded in the precise Terran style you used to nap during your early sessions, a folded jacket draped over your eyes. Someone remembered. You lift it gently, fold it tighter, and place it in your lap as the docking clamps disengage. The ship hums, engines igniting with a quiet pulse, and the station drifts away. No pursuit, no lingering suspicion. They let you go because they have nothing left to guard that you've dismantled them. Not with war, not with sedition, but with something far more difficult to contain, an idea. That structure is not strength, that kindness is not weakness, that diplomacy is not deception, it's endurance. You drift now through open space, no longer tethered to the Empire or its silence. Somewhere, distant systems are already forming new councils, provisional alliances, whispered pacts built on laughter, compromise, and oddly enough, synchronized shoulder shrugs. They call you a myth now, the Terran who unmade an empire without raising a weapon, the envoy of soft revolt, the architect of quiet things. You don't correct them, because it wasn't about you. It was about the moment someone said no without raising their voice, and someone else listened. You reach for your console, open the final entry in your diplomatic log, and type, mission concluded. Status, peace, not declared, but assumed. Empire, self-dissolved. Success criteria, surpassed. Final remark, we left with everything we needed, and nothing we weren't willing to share. You hit send, and then sit back, let your head rest, and listen to the engine hum. You've never been this tired, but you've never felt more whole, because in the end, you didn't save a galaxy. You gave it room to breathe. Asterisk now, you float. There is no mission left. No strategy unspoken. No council chamber, humming with restraint. Just the slow drift of your shuttle through space, so quiet. You can almost hear the heat leaking from the hull. You breathe deeply. One cycle in, one out. Far behind you, systems are learning to speak again, without fear, without obligation. Somewhere, a Valari child will grow up hearing both silence and song. Somewhere else, a Solari engineer will redesign a treaty in chords. An Axid filament will pulse once for curiosity, twice for hope, and none of them will know your name. Not really. You were never the point, just a catalyst, just a voice that chose not to shout. Your eyes drift toward the stars. Familiar now. Still burning. Still distant. But tonight, they feel softer somehow. Like they've finally been allowed to exhale. You close your eyes. Let the silence take you. not as a weapon, not as a wall, but as a blanket pulled gently across your shoulders that you've done your part, that you've tilted the table, that you've brought toast to the void. Let the galaxy reshape itself now. In giggles, in shoulder shrugs, in quiet rebellion. The stars will be watching, and so will I.